family and I, we really want to thank y'all for coming. It's been a long time, and we appreciate folks who are able to remember for so long and still be willing to come out after all this time. COVID and other health issues and unrelated, in my family just really made it impossible to do anything about this until now. But as I told a couple of people, in some ways it's lined up to be a almost perfect day in terms of relation, because tomorrow's Mother's Day and Diane was above all things a mother, and we have Tubby's ashes here with us as well today because she only survived Lamar by a few months. And you know, the following day after Mother's Day is Diane's birthday, so we have an interesting alignment of dates here for this. A lot of you folks, maybe everybody here, I'm not entirely sure, but a lot of people inquired about Lamar after his fall and his subsequent hospitalization and stroke, and I cannot tell you how much that meant to us at the time. It was, excuse me, a very difficult time, and all of that support, knowing that people up here still cared that much about him, really made things easier for us. Lamar enjoyed telling stories, and now the sun's out, this one's a little more appropriate. Actually, his whole life was about telling stories, I guess, in a way, first in journalism and then in public relations. And one of his favorite stories was about the fact that John F. Kennedy was the speaker at his college graduation. It was a blazingly hot day in Sanford Stadium, and Lamar always used to say that Kennedy probably gained at least 1,000 future votes just for keeping his remarks brief that day. So, in the spirit of that, I'm going to try to do that here today too, even though until the last few minutes we didn't have so much heat. But Lamar was born in a small town in Austin, Georgia, and he passed away in a small town, Millersville, Georgia. But in between, he lived the majority of his life in Charlotte. And in some ways, Lamar seemed always still to be a small town boy. He had a kind of innocence about him that he just seemed to be unable to even conceive that anybody would lie to him or take advantage of him. Not sure where he got that from, not from me, for sure, you know. But anyway, he just kind of almost put you in mind of the television show Mayberry and the kind of innocence that he had, you know. If I had to describe Lamar in a single word, that word would be passion. He was passionate about the things that he loved. And what were those things? At the top of the list was family. Above all, Lamar loved his family. When we attended Lamar and Diane's 50th anniversary party, he was much in love with Diane that day as he was the day that he met her, and through the years that they were traveling together, seeing Europe and experiencing that while they were stationed in Germany. He loved his children, one could say, I guess, almost to a fault. When he was a young boy, Lamar had to go to work very early to help contribute needed household money during a rough time for my family. And he worked his way through college. He got out of college with just a few $100s in debt that he took on during his last semester in college because he wanted to work full-time for the school newspaper. And other than that, he got out of it debt-free. But coming out of all of that, he never wanted his children to experience any deprivation. And he worked very hard to try to make sure that that was the case, you know, and I think he succeeded. Another thing that Lamar was passionate about was his country. He was an all-in patriot. He could be critical of domestic policy, especially fiscal policy, but when it came to foreign relations and the military, he was absolutely my country, right or wrong, but my country. That was Lamar. That summed him up. His favorite period of American history was the Revolutionary period. And in thinking about his funeral years back, he always said that was for the family, you know, that was for the comfort of the family, and it was for them to decide what was to be done. All he wanted was that it not be a time of sadness, but a time of pleasant memories. And the only actual request that he had in regard to his funeral was that he absolutely wanted a United States flag covering his casket. Because of the virus, it didn't play out that way. That wasn't something that could happen, but my wife selected the urn for him, and you could see that he's completely surrounded by the American flag, and he would love that. In regard to the other part of his desire about a funeral and trying to adhere to his wishes, we've tried to concentrate on fond memories of Lamar and telling stories within our family, memories of doing things with him, conversations, those sorts of things, trying to keep it positive, and hopefully to a great degree we've succeeded with that. USO was another great love of his life. That was coming out of his love for the military. He was a long-time USO volunteer, and he loved the USO, and he loved the people that he worked there with. He worked out at the airport for years and years and years. When he got to where he was physically no longer able to do that, he went to work in the Melt Center, and he continued to work there until he left Charlotte. So he was still working with the USO at the time he left, you know. When I came to Charlotte a couple of times to visit him, he took me with him out to the USO as a visitor. And, you know, it was a point of pride with him. He loved what they were doing, and he wanted to be able to show it off, you know. Interestingly, even though I was in the Navy, I did a hitch in the Navy, I was never in a USO until I was there as a guest of Lamar's, you know. But I do absolutely support the things that they're doing, yeah. Gardening. Lamar was an avid gardener. He grew vegetables, but he truly loved growing flowers. He got that gift from my dad. He could put a stick in the ground and make it grow, you know. He's just an amazing gardener. And Lamar's prized possession was his greenhouse that he had for many, many years. And it finally was taken by a falling tree that crashed it. And I really wanted to replace it for him. I would have loved to have been able to do that, but by that time he was no longer able really to use it anyway, so that never happened. Rivers. Anytime that we had a few days together, Lamar and I, he always wanted to take a river trip. If we had more than a day together, he wanted to be on the river. And we made several of those down in South Georgia. And we made one on the Oconee, down where I live now in Lilyfield. And we had some misadventures. And the worst of those was the one on the Oconee. We had greatly underestimated the amount of time it would take to make that trip. So we were so late arriving that my wife had panicked and called out search and rescue parties in 2 counties trying to find us, you know.
Oh my God.
And it was quite a trip. It was so dark that night. No moon, no stars, heavy cloud cover. dark river, closed in by trees on both sides. It was dark. And the only way we could actually proceed was we had a flashlight with us. Lamar would shine one bank, and then he'd alternatively shine the other bank. And I tried to keep it in the middle, you know, blindly keep it in the middle. But we got down there, and we met a rescue party about 50 yards, what was supposed to be our takeout spot. So we had arrived, but I really don't know if we would have ever known we had arrived, because there was supposed to be a pole lamp at that landing, and the pole lamp was out. There was a very good chance that we would have run by that takeout point, and I don't know, the next one for us might have been the ocean. You know? we had no backup plan. You know? We weren't supposed to be there to start with. Lamar was an avid book reader. He loved books. His journalism and public relations background, focused on facts as they were, led him to prefer, well, not prefer, he actually just didn't read anything but nonfiction. And in the last year of his life, I encouraged him to try writing, because he needed something to do. He physically couldn't do the things he'd done in the past, and he needed something to stimulate him. So he did try it, and he had a hard time finding a writing style that wasn't in the form of a newspaper column. But he did manage to get a piece published in Georgia Back Roads magazine. And so after he had succeeded with that, I encouraged him to write one about the neighborhood that we grew up in, because he was much older, he had many more experiences with it. I was the youngest child in that neighborhood, probably somewhere between 40 and 60 kids in that neighborhood, scattered over a period of 20 years or so, you know. I was the absolute youngest one there. So his memories and knowledge of it were much deeper than mine, and I asked him to see if he could write an article about it. Well, he was very reluctant. I took a lot of persuasion to get him to do that, but he did eventually take the task on, and he turned out a really warm and readable story. But unfortunately, he passed away before he was able to submit it for publication, so he never had a chance to find out if he could have gotten it published or not. Community. Lamar was a really avid booster of Charlotte and North Carolina. It was a deep love for him. Every time we came to Charlotte, we'd have to go around with him and see mostly the same stuff we'd already seen before in the previous visit. But occasionally they do something new. But he was taking you either way, you know, new or not. He was a big booster of Charlotte and the state. And he was a volunteer in the public schools. He worked as a fundraiser for the Salvation Army in a Santa costume, and interestingly enough, he actually had experience with that previously. When he was working his way through school in Atlanta, he worked for Riches for a time, and he wound up with his number being called to be Santa at Riches. So if you can imagine a 6'2" red-headed, flat-bellied Santa, that was Lamar, but he pulled it off some way. I don't know. I saw a picture of him in it, but never actually saw him in person. But he was also a regular blood donor. He donated both whole blood and platelets, and he had done that for years. And never had he finally got to where because of, you know, his physical conditions, he couldn't do it any longer. But he did it as long as he was able to. His love of rivers led me to think of them as a metaphor for life. They all start out as tiny streams. They're joined by other waters that are swelling and adding to them, and eventually they turn into mighty rivers. Well, those mighty rivers are eventually swallowed up by something greater than themselves, that are both the essence of the river and still something different. Between the beginning and the end, you have loops and twists, rapids and eddies, obstacles and clear channels, and they're all ever leading to the end, you know. The difference in our age and geographic separation kept Lamar and I from having the deep relationship that I think we both desired. But when circumstances led him to come to live in Milledgeville, I'd hoped he would have time to really get to know each other. But that was not to be, as you all know. This was my brother as I knew him, and I thank you for letting me share him with you. For those I didn't speak to personally, you may know that Lamar's daughter, Tova, who he loved dearly, did not survive him but by a few months. And so we're laying her ashes to rest today with his, to join their mother. You may have noticed that I did not mention anything about business in my talk about Lamar, and the reason I did not is that Joe Epley, his boss and a dear friend, had agreed to say a few words and address Lamar's professional life, which he probably knows far more about Lamar even than I do. He certainly knows more about his professional life than I do. So, Joe, if you're willing and ready, we'll turn it over to you.
It's not that even, Jeff.
It's really not.
Well, Lamar and I came to Charlotte about the same time. He was with Charlotte News. I was with WBTV. And we lived in the same neighborhood, only a couple blocks apart. And we were involved in politics. And of course, he worked for that other party while my wife and I were out digging up Democrats. But still, as time went on, my business grew. I had developed a client that was going to take somebody almost full time on, which is the Insurance News Service. And Benji Siegel here was a part of that. And so he came with me and stayed with me for about 33 years, I guess. The best way to describe Lamar was that he was a humble man, he was a loyal man, he was a truthful man, and he would do anything in the world to help you, no matter what it is. It's almost to a fault that he was a very kind, gentle human being. We worked many years together with Gail and Rosenberg, it's hard to say how many different things they have, but I know that I enjoyed him because I was sort of a ball thinker and go off on tangents, and Lamar was steady, and he would keep me down to earth, and that was the most important thing about him. And so it's just a wonderful feeling to know him, to count him as a friend and as a colleague for many years. And so that's about all I can say about him.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, that's really all we have planned, and I hope no one was disappointed. I do, once again, deeply appreciate everybody making the effort to be here after such a long period of time. I know it was difficult to, think about coming out here with threat of rain and the whole bit. So I'm very grateful for the friendship that everyone showed Lamar, and the part that everybody played in his life. We're very, very grateful for all of you. Very grateful. And
You know, one thing I might add is that the whole Gunter family was a big part of the Epley family. Lamar came to work for us, and I remember when went into partnerships to get our first office building. Diane and Dorcas they would swap off as janitor for the office, and then Diane was with us for many years as a receptionist and mother confessor. And then Tova came to work for us right out of high school, actually even before she graduated from high school. And she worked for Dorcas for many years, and accounting and events planner. So we and the Gunners were very close together.
he asked me a question.
No, he was just finishing up.
Well,
My dad has a hard
listen,
time hearing something.
we have still a good bit of allotted time. If anybody has a memory of Lamar that you'd like to share with the group, feel free to speak out on that. Would love to hear. Well, I can't hear, but yeah, I would actually love to hear anything. Right, if I could hear it. Yeah.
We'll tell them later what you said.
We'll tell you on the run over.
Do you mind?
Absolutely, Kevin. Anyone that wants to say anything, we're just glad to see people love Mom.
First of all, I want to apologize to everyone out here for the way I am dressed. I really did not. I do own suits and coats, and I would have put one on gladly, but I was running late as I usually am, and I did not know Lamar as long as some of you have, but I've been in touch with Gene, his brother, and of course we were very sorrowful to learn of his passing. But my wife and I are both members of the Dilworth Rotary Club, and we joined that club in 2017. That's where we got to know Lamar, and I was immediately taken by Lamar because of his love for history. I love history. I love the fact of his service to our nation. I'm a retired FBI agent, so we had that bit in common as well, and we talked history a lot. Lamar also started our club's first responder celebration in 2015-2016. So we have since that time named it the Lamar Gunter First Responder Event in honor of Lamar, and we're going to be celebrating our 6th one at the end of May, where we're going to honor a police officer and a medic. Gene, you mentioned his love of USO. That is so true. He absolutely loved USO and actually started a tradition in our club where we still have 2 members of our club that participate in USO, but it was because of Lamar's early involvement with it. It was something he loved. He was an outstanding writer. He did the newsletter for the Charlotte Dilworth South End Rotary Club for a number of years, and my wife took on those responsibilities, so she and he would talk quite a bit about some of the things that were going on and some of the more historical aspects of our club. I just wanted to say it was a pleasure, even though I did not know him as long as all of you have. I really respected him for his service to our country, for his dedication to Rotary and to the community, and for his truth. He was always a very, very truthful, straightforward talking guy, and I really, really appreciated him. He's a model for all of us, and keeping with your analogy, we're all just kind of tributaries from Lamar at this point. So thank you very much for the honor and privilege of being here today, and again, my apologies.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Oh, please do. Anybody.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gail Rosenberg McHugh, and I am
honored and blessed to have known Lamar and Tova and Kendall and Diane for many, many years, not as long as Joe and Dorcas, but for a very long time. In fact, when the Epley Associates office actually closed here and kept going in Raleigh, Lamar and Tova and for some period Diane and I stayed in pretty close contact. And some of the interesting parts about Lamar's sort of post-Epley days was in fact the USO, and Lamar was always looking for volunteers to come out and spend time at the Charlotte Douglas Airport USO office, and he is the reason that USO office, I'm convinced of this, has grown to be one of the most important USO offices in the country. It receives, I believe, among the highest number of troops passing through this airport of anywhere in the country, and the work that they do is phenomenal. You can see it when the troops come in off the planes or are getting ready to leave, just how important that is, and that was a lifeblood for Lamar. And Tova supported it, and Diane supported it, and it was a beautiful thing, and really a beautiful thing for the city, and it was talked about regularly. And it was just one of the things that made Lamar. There's another little piece of Lamar that is near and dear to me, just as a personal friend of his. If you ever were fortunate to drive by Lamar's house, then you know he was an avid gardener. And he in fact, none of us could throw coffee grounds away in our office because Lamar kept a big container of the spent coffee grounds, and at the end of the week he'd drag that big container home with him and he'd sprinkle it around his azaleas. Well, there would be times in the spring that there would be traffic going down his street to admire those azaleas, and he worked on them and he loved them. And the other piece of that, though, was Diane fed every stray animal in the neighborhood. Every single stray animal came to that house, waited for their food until Diane came out and fed them. And so, really and truly, Lamar and Diane were incredible caretakers of the Madison Park neighborhood. Today, my daughter, her husband, and their little 2-year-old, my almost 2-year-old granddaughter, live in Madison Park. And I drive right past Lamar's house frequently. It's not his house anymore. Some of those plantings have gone away, but I remember it affectionately, and I remember how much that neighborhood meant to Lamar. Neighborhoods change, they ebb and flow, as you all know. But Lamar and Diane and Tova and Kendall were kind of stalwarts of that neighborhood, and people love living there, and they are part of the reason why people come, they don't leave, and they just love it, and it's beautiful, and people take care of it. And my daughter, I don't know if my daughter will ever leave. Her husband's a physician with Levine Children's Hospital. They love it there, and I don't think you're ever going to get them out of there, and it makes me feel so good because it was Lamar and Diane's place. The other little side story is really about Tova. When I kept in touch with Tova, as some of you know, she had some struggles, some medical struggles, and some mental health struggles, and I kept in touch with her. And when Diane passed, she was devastated. Diane was absolutely her rock. I mean, just her rock. And Tova, I didn't know if Tova could really kind of sort of settle herself in the fact that she had lost her mom. And then she lost Lamar. And I went to where she was living not long after Lamar had passed. And it was COVID, and it was not a good time to be getting too close and comfortable near people. But boy, she needed a friend, and she needed a hand. And I kept that hand outstretched to her. My husband and I made sure that she got home cooked food, and we visited with her frequently. And that is nothing. It was really that Tova kept me connected to all that was local with Epley Associates. I had been in the Raleigh office of Epley Associates starting in 1984. And then, with the help of Dorcas and Joe, moved my now 36-year-old quadruplets who were born under the loving umbrella of Joe and Dorcas Epley when I worked for Epley Associates. The kids and I moved down here. I separated from my husband, and we moved down here, and Epley Associates literally became my family. I mean, it was my family, and Tova was a big part of that. So, you know, when somebody in your family has a little bit of a struggle, then the family rallies. Tova, Lamar, Kendall, Diane all rallied when any of us struggled. I can promise you, they were always there. Lamar in that little red pickup truck, he's delivering stuff, he's bringing stuff, he's hauling, he's everywhere. When they had some struggles, people were there for them too. And I'd like to believe that we all supported each other. This morning I talked to some of our former colleagues because I wanted to know who was coming and who wasn't, and who was going to be able to be there. And unfortunately, not a lot of us, Barry, thank you for being here, not a lot of us could get here today. But everybody asked me to share with you how much Lamar and Diane and Tova meant to them, and that it was a family, and it still is a family. And I think of it with all my love, and you know, these two people right here, you know, they're in my heart. They'll always be in my heart. And it was a special place, and the people were very special. And Lamar was a huge part of that. And so is Tova, and so is Diane. So thank you for letting me share that. And I wish you all a beautiful, beautiful Saturday afternoon.
I'm not really sure, but I think I may have left one significant part of that repertoire out. And my wife's motives for calling out those church parties, she didn't want to be raising 6 children by herself.
Good reason.
Well, just a quick note, if I could, from the neighbors and the neighborhood as well. When Lamar and Kendall took off for Georgia, they created a vacuum that to this day has not been filled. Specifically, Diane and Kendall's work on the Christmas party was reliable, knew what was going to happen that day, and that it was covered. They were in charge of the Christmas party for the Christmas Association. It was slim. Quickly, from the gardening perspective, who needs yard waste? When that red pickup truck is up and running and Kendall's in charge, your leaves are gone. Every fall, they just drifted, and you know where they ended up in the backyard, composting. The other part, of course, is the animals. We still don't know how the raccoons are being fed. So,
They would knock on the door.
yeah, that's not all. But again, the neighborhood really feels their loss. Not only, and Melissa can add to this as well, from the beauty that they brought, not only in their gardening and their willingness to share in their front yard, that gift, but also their souls as well. We really miss givers. We do today, so thank you. Thank you.
Proving to be treacherous territory up here. Anybody else have anything wanted to add? I don't feel young, but I realize that you guys have known my uncle longer than I have. A lot of you, and probably better. I just want to say I loved him, and he obviously loved you all, and so although I don't know you, I respect you all.
We're glad that you were there for Lamar when he needed you.
Anything else?
No.
Well, if you guys are have put plans, if we don't have anything else, if anybody else has anything to say, and I'm sorry I wasn't more eloquent. I actually went to journalism school, same place that Uncle Lamar did, but I didn't get his gift. So, but the respect is there. I really appreciate you all showing. Hope you all have safe journeys back to where you're going. Feel free to hang around and mingle all you want. Just so you know, the folks at the cemetery.